All right. It is 5 o'clock on Wednesday. Normally at this time, Craig and I are finishing up our weekly call to action, but this week we rescheduled the time to come back just a little bit later so that we can have a special guest join us today. If you had not watched Daniel's message last weekend about the consequences, the judgment that is coming when we sacrifice unborn children, I highly recommend that you visit the Corner Fringe YouTube channel and look up Daniel's message as we continue our study through the 10 Commandments. But it just so happened that the Lord put all these things together, and we had this opportunity to bring in a leader in Illinois, somebody who is an executive director of a pregnancy center in Northern Illinois, who has a lot more experience than we do regarding this battle and fighting for the unborn children. And so today I'd like for all of you to welcome our guest, Serena Dye, in. Thank you so much for joining us, Serena.
Thanks for having me. This is such a blessing.
Well, I am really excited to take notes and to learn a lot about you, your ministry, and how churches all around the world can get involved in the battle that you are facing. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and maybe a little bit of your testimony as it relates to this matter?
Yeah, so I have 5 kids and an awesome husband and a dog and a cat, and we live out in the country on 3.5 acres, and we're just extremely blessed. But my story starts when I was the tender age of 15 years old. I come from a family that did not know the Lord. My dad is from India and he's Hindu, and then my mom, she's American. And when I found out that I was pregnant, I was terrified to tell them about my pregnancy because it had always been a point of contention with my dad regarding having a relationship at a very young age. And so I tried to hide my pregnancy from my parents, but that didn't last very long because a friend's mom found out about it and came to our home and ended up sharing with my parents that I was indeed pregnant. And my life took a turn for the worst from that moment forward. My dad was always so kind and so sweet to me. I was a daddy's girl growing up, but I saw him turn into a completely different person. And for weeks, I endured extreme rage and anger, threats, name calling, all sorts of things because he wanted me to have an abortion. Now, my mom didn't want me to have an abortion initially. She had always taught me that it was wrong. And so I was fighting against my dad and saying, no, Dad, I believe abortion is wrong and I want to have this baby. So I was really strong at first because I was a really strong-willed teenager. And I had a dream of being a mom. Even at 15 years old, I was excited to have a baby. I know that's not normal for most 15-year-olds, but for me, it was. That had always been my ultimate goal in life, was to be a mom. So the more that my dad pressured me to abort, I became very weakened. I became very emotionally numb. And by the end of about a 2-week period, he was threatening to take his life if I didn't go have an abortion. And that's when my mind changed. And I said, I can't do this. I can't lose my father over my mistake, because I was starting to believe that I had made a really big mistake. So my parents took me to the nearest Planned Parenthood facility, which was in Iowa City. And I remember walking through the doors of that clinic. I remember the floors. I remember the walls. They were very drab and dark. I remember the chairs were lined up in rows like they were herding in cattle. There was plenty of seating for a lot of people. And by the time I sat down, those seats started to fill up with women, and I began to cry. The tears started rolling down my cheeks, and then my cry turned into sobs. And I was making a scene in the waiting room and upsetting the other women. And so my mom went up to the receptionist and she said, "Can you please take my daughter back early? She's making a scene." And so I was escorted back early and I was taken into the ultrasound room, and I wasn't told what they were doing. I wasn't supposed to see what was on the monitor, but I kind of inched my way up on the bed and I was able to see my baby on that monitor. And I saw the fluttering heartbeat and I began to cry again. And the sonographer looked at me and she said, "It's okay. You're very, very early. You're 8 weeks along." And that did not comfort me at all. That actually made things worse because I knew what a baby looked like at 8 weeks in the womb. We had just studied that in health class in school, and I knew that baby had little teeny tiny fingers and toes, even though she did not tell me any of that information. And so she asked me, "Do you even want to have this abortion?" And I told her, "I really don't. I'm really only here because my parents want me to have an abortion." And so by law, she had to escort me back out to my parents and they had to take me home. The car ride home was horrific. I, thought my dad was going to drive the car off the bridge. I was just a mess because he was a mess, and it was just a horrible situation. And for a whole nother week, I endured the same treatment from him. And my mom actually got down on her knees and begged me to have the abortion because he was making things miserable for her as well. He was threatening to divorce her, and he was our main source of income, and she felt like she was going to lose everything. So they took me up to another abortion clinic a week later, also in Iowa City. And this abortion clinic was different than Planned Parenthood. It was more like a house. And not a very nice one. So I walked in and I was taken back where I talked with a counselor who tried to console me by telling me that my baby looked more like an alien at my stage in pregnancy. And by this point in the process, with everything I was going through at home, I was so emotionally numb that I didn't even care that she was telling me what she was telling me. I just wanted to sign the papers and get it over with. And so I signed a paper saying that I consented to have the abortion. And I was taken back to the room with 2 workers, and I had a worker on each side of me. They were holding my hands, being very compassionate. They strapped me to a bed. The abortionist, he walked in. He didn't look at me or speak to me. He simply performed the abortion and he left the room. I remember feeling so traumatized by that experience because I felt ashamed of myself. I had never been treated that way by a doctor. I was only 15 years old. So up until that point, my pediatrician was amazing and treated me with such kindness and care, but this abortionist did not do that. And I remember hearing when my baby was sucked out of my womb into that vacuum machine. It was very painful and very abrupt. And then I was taken back to a room where I was given juice and crackers, and they monitored my bleeding and escorted me out the back door. I was taken home and I didn't receive any follow-up care from the abortion facility. And my parents kind of wanted to tuck it away like it never happened. And you know what? I really did too. I almost forgot about my abortion after that day. It was so traumatic that it became such a deep, dark secret, so deeply embedded that I didn't even think about it anymore. And I tried to go on with my life and finish high school. I tried to be a better daughter and a better student. But by the time I was graduating from high school, I was falling short in all areas of my life. I had anxiety and depression. I lost a lot of weight. I turned to alcohol to numb my pain. I ended up getting pregnant again at age 18. And this time I hid my pregnancy from my dad for 8.5 months. I would even go out to eat with him, and he had no idea that I was pregnant. But I fled my home when I found out that I was pregnant with my daughter. And I finally gave birth to a beautiful little girl. And that brought so much healing to my heart from the pain of my abortion without me even realizing it. But it wasn't until I was 28 years old and had given birth to all 5 of my children and had found a relationship with Christ that Jesus came and opened an invitation for me to receive healing from the pain of my abortion. I didn't even know that I was struggling with any post-abortive traumatic stress. I had no idea that all of the symptoms that I had been dealing with all those years had to do with my abortion, but God placed some very anointed women in my life who walked me through that healing process, and just starting to talk about my story alone gave me such great healing. I attended post-abortive Bible studies and counseling and some deliverance ministry to help. And that's the only reason why I'm able to sit here today and share my testimony with you, is because God has healed me to such a degree that I can open my mouth and share it openly. So since healing from the pain of my abortion, God's opened several doors for me to share my testimony around the nation. And I have had the privilege of sharing in the Iowa State Capitol, in Washington, D.C., at congressional hearings, at the Supreme Court, in the White House. But the most near and dear to my heart place that I've shared is inside the walls of the Christian church, because after I share my testimony, I'll always have a line of women that have been suffering in silence for years, who've never had the courage to share about the pain of their abortions. And so I did work in churches over in Southern California for several years. And then God moved my husband and I to Phoenix, Arizona. And Roe versus Wade was overturned while we were there. And I remember sitting in my recliner when I heard the news, and I was just weeping, because I had had the privilege of being a part of the fight to overturn Roe versus Wade. And I was rejoicing because I wasn't sure if it was going to happen in my lifetime or not. But here I was sitting there just praising God for what he had done. And then my tears of joy turned to a prayer. Lord, what do you want to do with me now? How do you want to use me now? And so God answered that prayer. Literally a month later, a friend reached out to me and said that she had heard my name in prayer for a job as an executive director of a pregnancy center in Illinois. And I said yes to that call, and God supernaturally moved our family back to Illinois. And so I see now why he would move us to Illinois, because it is a battleground for abortion right now.
Yes, it is. There's no question that we are seeing a change in this area. And before we get into that, though, I'd like to ask you, first off, what an incredible testimony. And thank you for the bravery in sharing that. But is your story unique, or are there other women that experience very much like experiences of family shame and being worn down, and the fear that you experienced as a young girl? Is that a unique feeling, or is this across the board when you interact with women?
What I found when I started to share my testimony nationwide was there were women all over the nation who had been experiencing the exact same symptoms. And we formed such a close bond and a sisterhood because we shared the same pain, and we understood all of the things that had happened to us in our abortions. We understood each other in ways that nobody else really could. So yes, I would say that what I experienced is very, very common. among post-abortive women, for sure.
That is really sad. It's, as a man, just hearing your story, and obviously having heard it before and sharing a little bit of my background, this is, for me, I'm getting a picture that I never had before. But let me ask you, the Roe versus Wade decision that was overturned recently became this, at least how I interpreted in the church, was this: yes, it is over. Like, we can stop fighting because we won the battle. Is that the truth of what you're experiencing today?
It's really not over. Actually, our work is just beginning, and it's turning into everybody needs to roll up their sleeves and put on their boots and get on the ground and be a part of the mission moving forward, because it's only made our work more difficult in particular states, particularly in the state of Illinois. So on average in Illinois, in just Illinois alone, we were seeing 99 women a day choosing abortion. But since the overturn of Roe, that number has increased to 270 women a day are coming into Illinois for abortions, because since Roe has overturned, the bordering states have upheld the sanctity of life, which is wonderful, but it has really complicated things in our state and made a very, very big issue that we need to work on. Also with COVID-19, Planned Parenthood started offering telehealth services to women. And so there is a big initiative with Planned Parenthood in Illinois with not only telehealth, but they've built clinics along the entire surrounding border of Illinois, so women can easily access abortions. Telehealth has shortened the decision-making window for women, and that is a big challenge for us. So we used to have more time to reach these women through our ads and our marketing, but now we're having to reach them in a different way. There's been a 500% increase in the emergency room because of women who have been sent abortion pills in the mail since COVID-19 hit as well. That continues to be an issue. Most women aren't even having to walk into the doors of an abortion clinic in Illinois anymore to have their abortions. They're simply seeing a doctor through telehealth, and then they're being mailed their abortion pills.
And are there obvious side effects that affect the woman if she takes these pills at home and has no care that go along with that?
There are a lot of different complications, and we've actually seen some of those in our clinic. There's definitely a high rate of hemorrhaging that can happen, especially for women who are anemic. There is a high risk of the abortion pills not working. And so we've actually seen women who've taken both pills and come into our clinic and felt like they were still pregnant, and they were. And so one of these women actually chose life because her baby's heart was still beating strongly, and she just texted us and said she's having a baby girl and she's so excited. We've seen women whose abortions were only partial, and so we've been able to refer them to get the care that they need, because once the abortion clinics administer these pills, they take hands off that woman. That woman is no longer their issue. And so who is the one that is having to deal with these women who are having these complications? It's the pregnancy centers or it's the emergency rooms.
Wow. What about, I've heard in the news about these mobile clinics. Is that in Illinois as well?
Yes, it is. Southern Illinois, actually, I believe that they just opened 4 mobile clinics along the southernmost tip of Illinois to reach the women in Kentucky and Tennessee.
So Planned Parenthood obviously operates off of a much larger budget than like your particular clinic, correct? So
yes.
How are you fighting the battle? It sounds like it's a tsunami that's coming against Illinois all around the borders. Are we seeing more pregnancy centers that are coming here. I would imagine Planned Parenthood has put more support for their effort around us and in the state. But what about for those who are doing the work like you? Are there more clinics being made here in Illinois?
Yes, so there is an initiative to target every community in Illinois and make sure that there's at least one pregnancy center in every community in Illinois that has an abortion facility. My pregnancy center in particular targeted a community near us that was actually the only community in Illinois that did not have a pregnancy resource center, but did have an abortion clinic. And we were able to open a clinic right across the street from the Planned Parenthood.
And has that had what are the response? I mean, what are you seeing a success rate? Can you, obviously, to go from 99 a day to 270 a day is a dramatic increase. What is the success rate of something like the work that you guys are doing at your clinic?
Since the overturn of Roe, pregnancy resource centers and clinics have been suppressed by mainstream media. So our ads have been suppressed on Facebook. We've pretty much gotten out of that digital space because they have not allowed us to even post our ads. Our ads are currently being suppressed by Google. And what they're doing is they're taking our ad and they're labeling that we are not an abortion clinic. So our strategy right now is to diversify our marketing efforts to reach these women in different ways. Now, one of those ways is that we would really like to start marketing our free ultrasounds through Google, because some clinics are requiring that a woman has an ultrasound before they get on that telehealth appointment. So if we can reach that woman before that telehealth appointment, then our chances of helping her to choose life are so much higher.
What are some, okay, so I feel a little overwhelmed with the amount of information that you have. And I think about all the things that are working against you. And we obviously, as Christians, we have a responsibility to step up and stand up. How do we get churches involved? What does the support look like? I mean, you can't spend all of your time reaching people like us. How can Christians get involved? They don't have to live in Illinois, right? They can be from anywhere.
Absolutely. I believe that what God is doing in Illinois is so unique compared to other states in the nation that have several pregnancy resource centers. So there's a statewide initiative in Illinois that our organization is a part of that plans to launch 25 more clinics like ours in the state of Illinois with a unified front. So we will all have the same franchise name. We will all be under the same marketing strategy. We'll have a centralized helpline for women to call into. And I believe that this unified strategy will enable us to eliminate the demand for abortion in the state of Illinois. That has to be our strategy, is to eliminate the demand for abortion. And studies have shown that if we can decrease Planned Parenthood's market share by 20%, we can shut down their clinics. That's not a very big number. They do have more funding than us, but they are still more vulnerable than us financially. So we have an opportunity to come together in such a unified way, just like Planned Parenthood is, except better because we have the Lord on our side. And so it's an all hands on deck movement in the state of Illinois. I was just at a roundtable meeting with 17 other directors in Illinois, and all of us kind of just have our hands up in the air right now. And we're like, Lord, what are you wanting? What do you want from us? And so I just saw such a vulnerability and a willingness to unify in a way that I have never seen before in the pro-life movement, particularly among pregnancy centers.
Wow. I was thinking about your testimony, and if there was a parent listening today, I as a father of 5 children myself, one of the things that I'm most concerned about is my children getting access to medical care that I'm not aware of, and then something bad happening. I don't want to compound something. I don't want to make it harder on my children. And your story is an example that comes to my mind. We have schools that are working and teaching children that it's okay to do these things. You have other people with authority that are talking to young children. But if you had a chance, if you were sitting across the table from a parent and whose child said, "Hey, I'm pregnant, mom, dad, I'm a teenager and I'm pregnant," what advice would you give that parent today?
I would definitely encourage parents to be gentle with your children in their moment of vulnerability and to respond the way that the Lord would respond to us, because his response would be so different than ours so many times. And, when I look back at the way that my dad and mom responded to my pregnancy, I don't think that they were thinking clearly at that time. And obviously the enemy had a big hold of their minds and their hearts. But in a culture of pro-life in the church, it should be at the forefront of our hearts that abortion is never an option. Abortion is never the right answer, because abortion did not help me. My parents thought they were doing what was best for their 15-year-old daughter. I get that. They had a worldly perspective about my situation, but that abortion did not help me. It hurt me. It hurt my future. It didn't bring greater security to my future. It actually caused me to spiral more out of control than I was before. And it's been a lifetime of healing. And now that I have 5 beautiful children, I know that my parents wonder what it would be like if that one child was with us. I know that they do.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have done a conference not too long ago, and one of the things that I really want to encourage parents to do is to be that voice right now. There are other alternatives. If you feel that the child can't raise a child, there's always adoption, right? There's other resources. There's ways to come alongside, but to add an injury to your child doesn't seem to be smart, right?
That's right.
And so that made me think also about like the church itself. So one of the things that you talked about your healing process was the church and some of the different ministries that came alongside you. When women who you interact with go into a church, do they feel like they're safe and they're welcome and they can be ministered to, or do they feel condemnation and judgment? How can we help them? What can we do better as a church?
I think if churches are constantly talking about the issue of life and are constantly engaging their congregation in ways to help women find the healing that they need, allowing the women in their congregations, inviting them to get up and share their testimony like my pastor did for me in California. That's literally what broke open that ministry for me, was just him saying, "Serena, I know you have something on your heart that you want to share. I'm just going to give you the freedom to share it." He didn't even know I was going to share my abortion testimony. But I think that giving women the freedom to open their mouths and to share is so important. But we have to be constantly having conversations about life and also about women. It's not just about the baby, but it's also about the woman. And that's something that I think was a key that helped us to overturn Roe, was that abortion doesn't just take a precious life, it also hurts a woman for a lifetime. I sat in church for 7 years without even realizing that I needed to heal from the pain of my abortion, because my church was not talking about this issue. My pastor was not preaching about abortion from the pulpit. This was not happening. And so it wasn't until God brought those women who were in this ministry and could detect my pain without me even telling them, that I was able to go down that journey of healing.
And I love look what the Lord has done and is continuing to do through you. And I would love to see more women have that opportunity, just like the rest of us, right? All of us come in dirty and sinners in need of a savior. And when we experience the gospel and we accept Christ, he does things that none of us could ever imagine. And it usually, at least in my cases, usually comes from that place that I was the worst. So there are great opportunities for the Lord to use many people here. What are some things that a Christian could do today? So what I immediately come to my mind is I picture as I'm driving down the street, the guys with the big signs that are so graphic that I have to cover my children's eyes. Is that the most effective way for us to take baby steps and get involved? How would you advise somebody that said, okay, my church isn't exactly talking about this? Should I go talk to my pastor? Where can I get resources and education? How can I volunteer? Any tips for us?
I definitely recommend building relationships with your local pregnancy resource center and asking what help that they currently need. And I promise you, they're going to give you a long list of their needs. I also recommend, going and talking to your pastor at your church about how your church can become that bridge for the women at the pregnancy centers who are choosing life, a bridge to the local church where they can continue to find the help and the resources and the healing and the wholeness that they need. Commissioning the women in the churches who have had abortions to be healed. And then after being healed, to always be talking and opening up that healing to other women is so, so important. We can all be advocates for life just by opening our mouth and speaking the truth, praying for our pregnancy resource centers, praying for the leaders, the workers, and the mothers that we need to be reaching. Also giving is so important right now. There is such an increased need for pregnancy centers nationwide for funding to reach these abortion-minded women, especially with the suppression that we're dealing with in marketing and outreach. Our clinic in particular has been a shining and bright star in the state of Illinois. We've had the privilege of influencing 10 other pregnancy resource centers to adopt our model. By model, what I mean is our medical model. So we actually are not a resource center. We don't actually provide material needs for women, because what we found back in 2014 was that an abortion-minded woman was turned off when she walked into a pregnancy resource center by seeing baby bottles and formula and clothes. And she was in such a spiritual battle in her mind, and she had already made up her mind that she wanted an abortion. And so we had to find a different strategy and a different approach to reach the abortion-minded women, because we wanted to see more lives saved. So we decided to implement a linear medical model in our facility. And by doing that, we went from reaching 2% of the abortion-minded women in our community to 66% today. And by implementing this medical model, we've seen 150 babies' lives saved just this year alone. So our clinic has a boots on the ground mission to go to every pregnancy resource center in Illinois that wants to adopt our model and become that unified front to reach more abortion-minded women. And that's going to be a part of this statewide initiative as well. We encourage. Oh.
No, I was just gonna say that was really exciting. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Keep going.
That's okay. So we're asking and we're praying for more regular monthly supporters, more donors, more people who believe in the vision and the calling and the mission of this statewide initiative for Illinois, because we believe that Illinois, being right in the heart of America, is being put on display right now. And the Lord is going to have his glory in all of this if churches and Christians will come together and see this mission forward. And so we're asking for people who have those financial resources to give, to pray about funding eliminating the demand for abortion in Illinois.
Wow. Yeah, that is a big task before you, and the work that you guys are doing here in Northern Illinois. Is there a way somebody could reach out? I know there's safety protocols. Should they just email me and then I can forward it on to you? If somebody needs to get in touch and wants to be a part of this, I did put a giving link in today's video. But if there was another way, if they need more information, how could we direct them? Is there a central place?
Absolutely. They can email me.
Okay.
Serena, SERENA @HLCIL.org. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. We want to definitely get people involved and plugged in to help with the work that's going on. And maybe you can elaborate on one thing that popped into my head as you were talking about these strategies that you're implementing and the shift. You mentioned that in your own testimony that after your medical experience, that was it. There was no more post-care. It was like, we did our job, we're done. That's not what you're doing now, though, right? People who are changing their minds, what are we doing to help encourage these mothers so that, they've taken a really hard decision, right? In some cases, they might be experiencing the pain and the suffering and the outcast from their own family and community. What are ways that we can help these mothers as well?
Absolutely. So one of our strategic priorities in this initiative is to build a bridge to local churches for the women who do choose life. And since we're not providing those material resources anymore, we're commissioning churches to open their doors and to have a storehouse of diapers and formula and baby clothes, and maybe throw women baby showers, have safe houses that women could flee to if they're in unsafe circumstances, which happens a lot. There are so many ways that the church can be the lighthouse for these women. And so we want to build measurable follow-up and follow-through for every woman who chooses life. That is so important, because you're right, the abortion clinics, they don't provide any follow-up care. They don't want that liability. After they've done their abortion, you are no longer their problem. And it was that way for me, and it's still that way today. And that's why some of those women are coming to us after their abortions, and we're receiving them with love and no condemnation and open arms. And hopefully we can plant seeds of healing and freedom in their life from the pain of their abortions.
Well, before we go, is there anything else that you'd like to add, or you feel like we need to get out? Are you available to speak to other churches? I mean, this is your time. Anything that we can do to support you, we want to do.
Absolutely. I always say yes to the Lord. If he opens a door for me, my answer is yes. So if there is a church or a ministry who would like to hear about this vision and mission in Illinois, I would be happy to share it. I also wanted to mention that it goes beyond Illinois, because if we eliminate the demand for abortion in the state of Illinois, we can increase and multiply that impact across the entire Midwest and across the entire nation. We can be that shining light to our nation on how we can truly end abortion once and for all. It's going to happen.
That would be amazing. I love your story. And what I think the part that got me and where I connect is when, as a child, you had the abortion, it started to destroy your life. But you said that when you had your child, that's when the healing began. Life brought more life. And that's how it is for those of us who believe in Christ. We are literally walking around not realizing how much suffering and how much pain and the burdens that we're carrying around and the shame and the guilt that goes with all of that. But when we put our trust in Christ, all of a sudden the healing begins. And not only do we get to be somebody who can be healed, but we can also go around and do just like you were doing. And those people that work with you and who are fighting this battle all over the country, we can become advocates for those who are hurting and suffering everywhere. And I really appreciate you for all the work that you're doing. doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, friends, this is all the time we have today, and I encourage you to go back to listen to Pastor Daniel's message from last weekend as he talks about the matter of abortion and the consequences and the judgment that we will face as a country for being a part of this. It is important now, more than ever before, that we, the church, stand up alongside those people who are being victimized. It is a terrible atrocity that is taking place. Not only are we seeing our unborn children being put to death, but those mothers are being forced into places and suffering consequences that honestly, they don't need to be suffered. They don't need to be burdened with. We can love them. Choosing life is always a good thing. And I guarantee you that if the church rose up today, just as Serena has said a few minutes ago, we could put an end to abortion. So would you please consider supporting? I put the donate link in today's video. And if you have any questions, I put Serena's email there, and you can always reach out to me at mike@cornerfringe.com. Well, friends, we're going to end it there. And until next week, shalom.